Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Cup of Joe with Joe this evening. I am your host, Joe Evans. Thank you for showing up, everybody. Dolores, again, pleasure. Welcome. Steve, thank you for joining us. Absolutely, definitely free Assange. That is one of our big agendas here at Kerberos Media. So thank you very much for stopping by tonight. Now, we had some things that I originally had planned on discussing, and we'll get to those here in a little bit. That said, I'm actually torn here on an awful lot of fronts. Reason why is because I do recognize the seriousness of what is going on in the Ukraine. I do recognize the problems with what's going on in Eastern Europe with regards to the way Russia has decided to handle their longstanding issues, which have been ongoing since 2014 with regards to the Ukraine. Now, recently there was a military action in which Russian aircraft actually ended up bombing a maternity hospital in one of the cities, I believe it was Mariupol, in which there are still people injured. People weren't able to evacuate. They're still in the process of clearing the rubble. And this is serious. I want to be able to extend my heartfelt grief for what is going on in the Ukraine right now. I just have trouble feeling that without also going along and expressing how essentially critical it is to recognize that this has long been a standing argument that when the US does it, it was accidental. The United States has a long history of bombing hospitals. We are not the only ones that have a significant problem with that. We've had problems with our allies, Israel, taking out healthcare clinics in Palestine occupied regions. Turkey has had the same problem in dealing with Syria. US jets, drones have bombed hospitals in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria. So for us to scream Russia bad for their first incident in the bombing of a hospital since the end of World War II, in relationship to the number of hospitals the US has bombed in the last 20 years alone, comes across as rather empty to the refugees of Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen, Palestine. We are not going to see an appropriate resolution to the problem with Russia and Ukraine until we also see the appropriate resolution to US interventions abroad. Just keep that in the back of your mind as we continue to watch developments in the Ukraine and the rest of the world, such as Yemen, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, even, as our new allies, the Taliban, continue to manage the governance of Afghanistan. Yes. Absolutely. It's difficult to know how to feel about Ukraine. Okay. This is another thing that we have going on, the significant amount of propaganda. We have deliberate propaganda machines that we all have access to, whether it's from US sources, whether it's from Ukrainian sources, Russian sources, various other NATO sources. We continue to see the propaganda coming out of the Ukraine, minute by minute. It's fresh in our face. It's on Twitter. The latest event, which may or may not have been real, a lot of the stuff that we see turns out that it is recreations or it's historical footage of things that have occurred. Okay. Yes, there is violence in the Ukraine. Yes, there is violence in the Donbass region. There is violence in Crimea. This violence is real. It does exist. There are people who are being harmed and hurt, including the issues related to our DBS policies, divest, boycott, sanction. Sanctions have a nasty problem of affecting, the working class in any country in which, it's leveraged against. Cuba, the Cuban refugee crisis, largely because we've decided to sanction the government, which ultimately is never hurt by sanctions, because all they do is redistribute from the poorest up to the wealthiest who run and maintain the government, while the poor continue to suffer. The people we intend to hurt the most never even understand that the sanctions have taken place in a lot of cases. So when it comes to your ideas of boycott, divest, and sanction, when it comes to nations and peoples, keep that in mind when we call for sanctions, because we have Russian refugees, Russian immigrants here in the United States. We have these people who've grown to become part of our community. Our Russian-themed restaurants and boutiques. They're ran by second and third generation Russians who came here for many different reasons. But they brought and invested in America with their culture. So, with that in mind, thoughts and prayers. Yes, you know how I feel about that. I'm not prepared to send myself or my kids to die for something right now that should have been resolved long ago by the people, we the people, elected. There's still a peaceful way out of this. Whether or not the United States decide to take it or not remains yet to be seen. Okay, moving on, folks. What we actually came to talk about tonight. Okay, Idaho in the news. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have heard about it. We have somewhat problematic bill that has happened here in Idaho. Okay, this follows along with the same bill that occurred in Texas. This is about gender affirming care. And so in this case, let me see if I can go ahead and pull it up. We are actually looking at House Bill. Okay, you have to go back and actually find the latest here. Latest in regards to this. So what we're dealing with right now is the fact that they have decided in the state of Idaho that gender affirming care is going to be a felony. Okay. Atlanta. Okay. Well, let's get back to this with gender affirming care. State of Idaho's the House. Okay, this is the lower house as opposed to the Senate, our House of Representatives for the state. Now, what has happened in the House is they have passed a bill that criminalizes gender affirming care to the point where they will even consider it a felony if you were to take your child outside of the state to receive their gender affirming care. Now, one of the problems that we have in Idaho with regards to this line of thinking is really how great the hypocrisy is in the line of thinking. Okay? The state of Idaho is one of the few states in the union, very few, it may actually be the only one, that grants religion as an affirmative defense for medical neglect. Okay. I'm going to say that again. The state of Idaho grants religion as an affirmative defense for medical neglect. Ultimately, what this means is you can pray your child to death, and there is nothing a prosecutor in the state of Idaho can do about it. I need to say is I believed in the power of God to heal my child. And you walk. Okay. Yet here we are saying that it's all right if you're a parent to raise your children that way. It is your parental right. We believe in parental rights here in this state. We believe in the rights of the parent to do what they believe is in the best interest of their children. They believe. Yet for some reason, in this one particular case, they've decided that anything that even smells like gender affirming care justifies life in prison. Yes, life in prison. So here you have a child who wants to do something, who has a parent that loves them and wants to help them. Yeah, we can discuss about Munchausen by proxy and a number of other issues. Ironically, Munchausen by proxy is actually a higher percentage of the population right now than transgenderism in the state. Well, transgenderism in the United States. Yeah, but that's a different issue. Here we literally have parents who are interested in making sure that their children are healthy emotionally, making sure they are healthy physically, working on trying to ensure that they receive the best care possible pre-transition, during transition, after transition, however you want to look at it, making sure that they have access to the psychologists. And the irony is for transition to occur, you need more than just the parent to be involved. You need a psychologist. You need a physician. You need counselors. Okay, so mind you, these parents just can't autonomously walk into a clinic and say, I want my boy to be a girl. They can't do that. That child literally has to sit down with a counselor, literally has to sit down with a doctor. And then the doctors can then advise the parents on whether or not they will participate in this child's transition. Which means somebody's got to go looking for it, looking hard for it. In contrast, I believed in the power of God to heal my child. And you can walk away on murder by neglect. Okay. Amberly, one of the things you brought up the point. Trans community makes up less than 1% of the nation's population. Young trans, even less so. Okay. Now, there are an awful lot of things that go on within the trans community, and there are a lot of reasons why individuals transition. And also, The fact that they can transition at this time in history is another consideration when we actually look at what trans means in America, in the United States. In a lot of cases in history, okay, um, there were people who just assumed different identities because of their chemistry. You know, stories of people who one day, um, young women just left the community, left a family. 6 months later, the young woman comes back. Well, her cousin comes back to live with the family. And her cousin's a man. Now, we actually had legislation laws in a lot of states about concepts of women becoming men simply because of the nature of the role that men had that women didn't in the community in the role. Thing is we still have those gender biases. We still have those gender rules. We still have those gender confirming language in the United States and the way we do business and the way we conduct operations. We say that you can't do that unless you're a girl, or you can't do that unless you're a boy, or that if you like that, you're really a girl. This is a violence in our language, folks. Yeah, this creates victims in our languaging, emotions, and nativity, so that we can't evolve. This is pain. This is hurt. This causes us to want to be things that we aren't because we were told that the things we want to do, we can't do unless we're something other than what's between our legs. Now, within that community, there are those that are born chemically different than what they were born equipped with. These people need our help. And right now, we've just made it a felony in the state of, okay. Let's be honest here, folks. This bill will not pass. It will not survive. Okay. It will go through the House. It will go through the Senate. It will go to the governor's desk. It may even become law. The second it becomes law, though, it will be on its way to the Supreme Court. It will go to the Supreme Court. It will be denied for so many different reasons. And it will cost the state of Idaho a significant amount of money to defend this bill. However, in the meantime, we still have to deal with the fact that our legislature has decided to place religion above our Constitution. Placed it above our Bill of Rights. Freedom of religion. Freedom from religion. The separation of church and state. They've decided to apply religious bias to state laws, codifying violence against, as Amberly has pointed out, a very small percentage of our population. Why? Because they'd rather persecute divergence than accept diversity, because someone told them you must all be the same as God's will. This is going to be an interesting aspect. Reason why is because despite this fact and the fact that there are significant members of the LDS community that do recognize gender affirming care as one of them, um, this is still a very conservative state. Hopefully, they see that the rights of the parents in this case and in the best interest of the child, that this law is not something that should be passed in the state of Idaho, simply because of how few people it would truly end up affecting. And those few people it does affect would be impacted very negatively. Okay. Remember, transition is not something that is just automatic. It is not something that you walk in one day and say, cut it off. Although I've heard stories. Um, and it's done. No, it's a process, it's a procedure. It requires partnerships with physicians, with counselors. It requires people who understand to make sure that the transition happens the way it's supposed to, or that the transition should even happen in the first place. Um, and this law takes away that choice, that opportunity to explore what truly is best for an individual in question, and making sure that they receive the counseling that they need in question. Um, okay. Okay, two major parties allowing themselves to be pulled to the fringes in the pursuit of political dominance. Okay, and you're right out here in Idaho. This is absolutely, it's about balkanizing. It is about going in and saying, if you don't believe in this, you are not a Republican. If you don't believe in fighting this, you are not a Democrat. Um, the point is, and this is ironic because Republicans are supposed to be about a minimum number of laws. Republicans are supposed to be about parental rights, about family cohesion, about family knows best, about father knows best. Okay, these are the traditional values that are associated with being a Republican. Yet here we are in a state right now where the Republicans are making an all out attack on allowing a father or a mother to determine what is best for their children, for their family. Believe me, it's not cheap. Nobody's doing this on the down low. It's not a cheap process. Um, Political opponents converted to those who have ideas. And this is the process of otherization. Okay. Make somebody the enemy by dehumanizing them, making them evil. We do it. We do it an awful lot. One of the interesting things, though, is we actually have, okay, for those of you who don't understand just how important freedom of expression and freedom to be yourself is to the Libertarian Party in the state of Idaho. One of our transgender youth is actually going to be one of our key speakers at our convention coming up here. Okay. We support the trans community. Yes, we do. I know there's an awful lot of libertarians out there going, we do? Yes, we do. Okay, this is freedom of expression. This is freedom to be yourself. This is the ultimate expression in the pursuit of happiness. Okay, pursuit, it's not guaranteed, but the opportunity to be happy in the body you're in by choosing how you look, how you feel, expressing it. We live in a day and age where that's possible now. Okay. Lana, unwed mothers, they got sent away for a while, right? Yeah, they got sent away. And they would come back with a little sister or a little brother. They would just be adopted into the family. Here we go. Gender roles. Less technology made practical and efficient for survival as technology makes those irrelevant. This is growing pains. And, yeah, and this is one of these things. We talk about diversity. We talk about the fact that gender roles, they no longer need to be what we believed they were. Okay. We take a look at what the gender roles are. We automatically categorize. Well, if you're going to be a nurse, you need to be a woman, because only women are nurses and boys are doctors. Okay. That hasn't been the case for decades now. Yeah, it was 1970 when we actually finally made it legal for a single woman to have a bank account without a male cosigner, whether it's her father or her husband. Okay, these are the growing pains that we are having here in the United States. The fact that we still believe that certain gender roles exist, even after we've proven that because of the technology, because of other things that are going on, they no longer need to be. What you want to become as an American, as a global citizen, as a person, is no longer defined by what's between your legs, with perhaps one exception, and that's the ability to give birth. They have not quite been able to recreate a uterus inside a male body yet. They're working on it. I don't know that many men willing to go through it. Who remembers Arnold Schwarzenegger as the pregnant man? Yeah. Yes. It's one of those things that's ironic. Here we are in 2020, 1980s, the most manly man of men, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay, the prototypical stereotype of the 2020 toxic male actually starred in a movie as a scientist who made himself pregnant. And here we are, we're being offended by gender neutral performers. Dude, guys, come on. We had Boy George, Poison, Rat, hair bands, Motley Crue. Come on, guys. I don't know about in Texas, but we might actually be able to do. Actually, you know what? We do. We do. Ironically, it's the Satanic Church of Idaho who has actually come out and created within the religious ideology certain things that are in the process of being made illegal in the state of Idaho to be covered under religious tenets, so that things like this can be protected. Now, I really hate that they're doing it as a satanic church, because I mean, it's yeah. But yes, we do have a church here in the state of Idaho that is actively trying to do this in places where the ACLU has failed to get a lot of these laws repealed at the state level. But yeah, I don't know about it in Texas because I'm not sure how much leeway Texas gives to religious freedom in relationship to what they consider child abuse. Okay. Now, I know the limits to which Idaho will go. In Idaho, you can send your kid to school with a flopping broken arm with no cast on it for 2 weeks until the kid dies of sepsis. And you can walk because you believed in the power of God. Okay. To what degree Texas allows that level of medical neglect, and how they would transfer all of that within the concepts of gender fluidity and so on. It's you're gonna have to talk to somebody from Texas, is what I'm saying. Um, let's keep on going here. Uh, this is an interesting concept right now, because this is actually a problem, and it's a continuing problem. In it, the irony of this as legislation is it almost always occurs in a crisis of empire. Okay, during the fall of empire, as we start to look at the way the empire has so deculturalized its furthest reaches that the core people who live in the capital no longer seek to reproduce. They have no reason to. They don't need children to take care of them in their old age because that is what the state is for. That is what the empire will do by continuing to go out and exploit the colonies. A way to force every viable person into having more white babies because white births are in decline. You can give some of you guys some time to think on that one. Okay, because really that goes back to our issues of diversity versus divergence. Um, and it's also dangerous because just because you force people to have children doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to have children with the character traits that your eugenics focused mind wants to have. Randy, counselors and doctors require that they live openly as the gender for a year at least with an HRT before they will even start the surgical process. Okay. Like I said, there's a process, there's a procedure. It's not an easy procedure. There are lots of times to walk it back before it reaches a certain point. Take care and God bless. I don't care what you do as long as you don't bother me and you're contributing. Okay. Now that's actually an interesting thing. There is the Institute for Justice. And within that Institute for Justice, it's an international, and they have a concept. It's called live and let live principle. Okay. The 3LP, live and let live principle. Okay. And essentially what this is as long as no one is being violent towards me, I will let you do what you do. As long as what you are doing is not violent towards anybody else. Okay. This continues to see a real big problem, associated with, the fact that the state is actively being violent. The state is actively interjecting itself into the lives and making decisions for people, regardless of what is in the best interest of the people they are making the decisions for. Okay. Nobody can wreck your life faster than the government who believes that they're doing the right thing by you. Yeah, we're here from the government and we're here to help. Some very scary words. Robert, okay. Some of the best doctors I've ever had were women, straight up. Some of the best nurses were men, straight up. Um, you know, health care providers wanting to take care of people and heal them knows no gender. I don't understand why people think, well, if you're a man, you want to kill stuff, and if you're a woman, you want to heal stuff. Yeah, no. violence of the heart, and the desire to heal people. No, no gender. There are women and men who run the entire spectrum. And if they do trend one way or another, is because of cultural conditioning, not because of the way they were born. Hey, yeah, very, very few, if ever, if ever. And this goes in with a Hippocratic oath. The reason why is because hormone blockers can actually be reversed at any point. Okay. Being able to make the decision prior to the full brain development at 18, 19, 20, whenever it is you decide that an individual has reached maturity. Okay. These are one of the reasons why they delay the onset. And it gives them an opportunity to be who and what they want to be. Lana, no joke, 70s. Mother saying she'd need a man to buy the house. Unable to be single female. Took a long time to get that changed around. Yes, they were. Yes, they were. G.I. Jane, the movie. Sorry, Robert. Yep, I'm dating myself. I'm dating myself hard with that one. Chefs are men. Julia Child. She broke the barrier. Moved from being the person who just cooked whatever for dinner versus person who prepared. You know, Lutheran Church and Satanic Church in Arkansas. Yeah, the Lutheran Church is actually real good with regards to LGBTQ rights. They've been absolutely fantastic, and along with several other reproductive rights for women, another big thing. Right, Lana? She makes the big bucks. He watches the kids. On the upside, Church of Satan could be an impetus for abolishing tax exemption for religious institutions. Woo! Yes, loving that one, man. Loving that one. Let's go ahead. Lana, 20 years ago in Illinois, got recorded as a spinster. Marital abuse, domestic violence, marital rape. Again, that was only recently overturned, relatively speaking, within my lifetime, within living memory. I love the cast iron stories. I really do. I really do. They are awesome. Okay. So let's move on from the gender affirming care. Reason why is because this is a big issue: diversity versus divergent culture wars. Okay, now here in America, we are a diverse culture. We have people from several different cultures around the world that have come, and we've also called it the melting pot. And ironically, there was actually one brief period in time in which it was actually being contemplated, being called the tossed salad, because we didn't actually all melt into groups. We just sort of formed up and we had little spatters of everything everywhere. We had Chinatown, we had Japanese town, we had the garden cities. We had the little areas that were set up specifically that, for lack of another term, were the slums. They were the areas in which we put a particular ethnic group in to separate them from the dominant culture in the area. Yet these people would still become part of the culture, become part of the environment. You go to San Francisco, Chinatown, LA, Chinatown. Up until fairly recently, we even had Garden City, which was Japantown. It's where an awful lot of the settlers that were located in Camp Minidoka were able to get housing at the end of World War II when they were released from the internment camps. And that area in turn became, was just sort of absorbed by the larger community. Other areas you still see very distinct ethnic division lines. A lot of them based on the way that a given state will decide to handle the refugee resettlement programs that are sponsored by the United States. Okay? In addition to that, we have within the human race, the human experience, diversity. Okay. The way you think, the way you act, the way you believe. Okay, not everybody is within that one standard deviation, as we like to call it. Not everybody is that C, the average on the chart. You have people who are smarter. You have people who are less smart. You have people with greater emotional capability, the ability to understand, the ability to help heal, reach out, touch. We see people of exceptional character all the time. And depending on the nature of that exceptional character, we either turn them into gods or we turn them into demons. Sometimes we do both. Okay. Elon Musk, he's one of those. We're going to talk about him here in a little bit later. But these are one of the things in diversity versus divergent. Okay. In the United States, when we look at somebody who is exceptional in some way, we have people who see them as, I want them to be part of making my world a bigger, better place. Okay. Yeah, and this is something absolutely. Right, right. We had our riverfront property that was minority housing. It was primarily the Black community until we cleaned up the river and gentrified that strip of land and turned it into high value property instead. Uh, Boise River, actually upstream of Boise, we had a butcher plant that would just pour the blood into the river. When the EPA in the 70s came in and actually gave us money to go in and clean up the river and turn it into nice riverfront property, all that changed in a heartbeat. But back to this issue of diversity, even neurodiverse, okay? The neurodiversities in which, and thing is nobody's actually normal. We have people who are able to adapt, okay? And in a sense, that's what we look at with neurodiversity is, are people capable of adapting and surviving the education system that we've created to weed out those people who are neurodivergent? Okay. Now, some school systems, if they're big enough, actually go in and try and incorporate classes and education programs to actually facilitate for the neurodiverse that are within their community. ADHD, autism, things like that. Good point, Brandy. Okay. We have school systems that try and accommodate them and make sure that they receive a comparable education. Right? Uh, but the thing is most of our school systems, the way we've developed school curriculums over the last 20, 40 years, okay, the idea was to separate the normal, the neurotypical, from the neurodivergent, rather than making sure that we are capable of giving those people who are neurodiverse the best education that they can receive. Okay? This is one of the most damaging things about No Child Left Behind. Was the idea that even neurotypical students were reduced to the speed at which a neurodiverse student could learn within a classroom system created specifically for the neurotypicals. Okay. This starts to get real messed up. Reason why is because emotional abuse related to your ability to process information, retain it, and the way you interact on an emotional level with people around you is can be one of the most traumatic events of grade school. Childhood trauma continue to be relived. Um, okay. And see, that's one of the things about languaging. Okay. In when you start talking about diversity versus divergent in our culture wars, 'cause that's really what it is, Lena. Divergent is inoffensive. It's an alienation. It is they are somewhere else. They are something else, and they do not belong with the group. Okay. Second, you start talking about diversity. It changes the process because now you're talking about inclusion. You're talking about bringing people in. You are now allowing the way somebody else processes information to influence your world because you've invited them in to be part of the community, to be part of the family. So when you start talking about, well, he's just neurodivergent, you just told him to go sit over in the corner versus, I love the change in thinking that you bring to the problem. You are the one who thinks outside of the box and comes up with solutions that aren't obvious to those of us who were trained to process information in the standard education system. Um, and that is an issue with regards to some of them. Some of them simply do not have the coordination or the processing for certain skill sets. That doesn't mean they can't be part of the community in some other way. Um, but that's part of the process of finding out where they fit, where they work, what they can and what they can't do. Everybody has the ability to contribute in some way. Let's see what else we got here. Reasonable accommodations for neurodiverse people. Yeah, you don't need to put them on chemicals in order to make sure that somebody with ADHD has an education. Um, and that's part of the process, Robert. It's it's a way of looking at things that isn't exclusionary. It allows them to be who they are in the most honest way possible and still giving them an opportunity to contribute to the community. Um, and yeah, it absolutely is hard in the trades, um, particularly the way that we create the trades and the things that go in with them. And you're right, Sandy. It doesn't have an awful lot to do with the school districts. Certain school districts have the funding, have the resources, the capability to handle the neurodiverse individuals within their community, and some don't. So we work on making sure that everybody has a space and the ability to develop and work within those spaces. That's part of the process when we start talking about the idea of diversity versus divergent in the culture wars. This gets particularly interesting as you start looking at individuals who are starting to renew the look into eugenics, the use of selective breeding, deciding who and can and cannot have children. Okay? Adaptability is one of the greatest strengths of the human race. Ultimately, it's not our intelligence, it's not our strength, it's our adaptability. It's the fact that we can learn and adjust ourselves to any new environment as it comes along. The fact that we've been able to adapt to a specific education system that gears us towards a particular kind of economy At some point in the future, that economy is going to collapse, and the humans that are going to survive are going to be the ones who can adapt to the new economy. Having someone selectively breeding us because they think they know what's coming next is what leads us into significant moral and ethical issues. As we brought up with regards to the earlier comment of, we need more white people to have white kids. Yeah. Um, and you're right. We wouldn't be interacting with each other right now if it wasn't for the human species. Amazing, amazing ability to adapt and learn to cooperate. Um, okay, some of the other things. This is another issue that's come up here in the state of Idaho. House Bill 666. Yes, they picked that particular number. Reason why they picked, I have no idea why they picked that particular number. I think it just happened to be a random assignment. It just happened to fit so well with this particular bill. But what they've decided to do in Idaho is they've decided to make it a felony if a librarian gives a child access to material that some arbitrary board has decided is unsuitable or harmful for children. And I don't know how many of you have actually taken a look at the process it takes to get a book into a library. It's significant. The interesting thing was one of the individuals who actually came out in support of this legislation, who testified in support of this legislation, was a librarian. Ironically, a significant part of her testimony was the content she found looking through the browser history on the library computers in the children's section. Okay. I'm not a real big fan of censorship. Right, Sandy? Um, but you can put a net nanny in the children's section, really, honestly. You don't need to create a law that could arbitrarily land a librarian in prison for 2 to 5 years because somebody decided that something the child had accessed in that library while that librarian was on duty was unsuitable material. Um, and you're right. It is another posturing bill to attract fringe voters, um, which makes it particularly dangerous. And yeah, it's not going to survive the Senate in the state of Idaho. Matter of fact, the Senate pro tem has said, it's not going to make it. It's not going to survive. He probably will not allow it to be seen on the Senate floor, even if it does go into committee. It will die before the end of the session. But again, this was one of those bills that was written fringe, and the stories were deliberately aggravating. You know, um, as for why some of that stuff was showing up on the browser history inside the children's computer section, yeah, I'm not sure that was entirely the children. Um, Fortunately, they're about to change that. It's an election year. It's an election year. The entire Senate and the entire House and some of the people who were our rogues in the House that love all of these high profile bills are now running for Senate office. And yeah, he does. He can literally kill bills. But I mean, this is one of these things. We're looking at more and more posturing. We're creating more and more balkanization in our politics, more extreme politics. And the thing is these extreme politics are creating more and more controls. Fewer and fewer decisions that you as a person are able to make about the choices in your life is the end result of an awful lot of what's coming on with this balkanization in our politics. Whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, you're seeing these bills that are designed to create fringe political movements that are designed to institute controls to prevent you from thinking and acting specific ways within your community. This is the astroturfing of authoritarianism. Pay attention to what's going on. And this goes back to now, we've talked about it before. Matter of fact, KRTD is huge on this issue. Huge. Dump the incumbents. Get in, vote. Get in and run. It's actually a danger here in the state of Idaho. It is Wednesday. We have 2 more days to register to get on the state ballot to challenge incumbents in the state of Idaho. Okay, 2 more days. Thursday, Friday. Okay. If your application to be on the ballot isn't in by 5 p.m. Friday evening in the Secretary of State's office, chances are there will be an unopposed grifter sitting in there waiting to take money from some evangelical organization to put in bills designed specifically to lose in the Supreme Court, but in the meantime would affect your ability to make personal decisions in your life. Absolutely, Lena. It's about that time. I'm wrapping up here soon anyway. Censoring books just make me want to read that book. Yeah, we've done that. We've all liked that. So one of the other things that I want to come up with, just buy an electric car. Pete Buttigieg, okay, Department of Transportation chair, the individual who has enough money that he was able to pay for a surrogate mother to have a child for him and his boyfriend, in which he promptly took 6 months of paternity leave with his boyfriend to spend with this new surrogate child, made a comment, just go buy an electric car. Okay, most single mothers earning less than $30K a year with 2 kids living in $1,000 a month apartment can't just go out and buy a $50,000 to $80,000 electric car because gas prices are going up. Okay, gas prices that are going up not because of the Ukraine war, because Russia provides 3% of our oil. Okay, but they want us to go buy an electric car in which Russia provides 20% of the nickel needed for the batteries. Okay, some people are not paying attention to what is going on with the global economy or what is going on with the state of warfare globally in the United States and our relationship with sanctions with Russia. Okay, that electric car just went from $50,000 to $100,000 because of how much more expensive the nickel is going to be to acquire to make the batteries that go into the cars. And that doesn't even begin to talk about the issues of the lithium. Okay, we have not reached a crossover point in our technology and our economy that makes it feasible for a 25-year-old single mother with 2 children making under $30K a year to just buy an electric car. Let's be reasonable, folks. You continue to make out of touch statements like that while holding significant influence over the future of the United States. Dump the incumbents. You need real people in office with a history of solving real problems with real solutions. And if they can't solve the problem at the state level, at the government level, at the federal level, they need to shut the hell up and give you, the individual citizen, the right to solve your problems your way, as long as you aren't violating the rights of your fellow human beings. So, with that in mind, folks, peace out. It's been great talking to you. Remember, dump the incumbents. Yeah, we got all the good things. We don't have enough electricity right now for all electric cars. You know, King's Court, it's the capital. We all saw the shows. Yes. So remember, folks, dump the incumbents. I'll catch you next week. You guys have a great time. Love you. Family, friends, community. As long as you got those three, you can make anything happen.